Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. And please tell all of your family and friends about your favorite podcast, the Reading with Your Kids podcast. As we end 2022, we're looking back at some of our favorite moments from the year. We'll be listening to highlights from our interviews with Jason Broughton, the director of the National Library Service, Ben Feller, former chief White House correspondent for Associated Press, and one of my favorite guests of all of 2022, Jazmyn Simon, star of Raising Dion. Join us right now from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. I'm really excited today. Our guest is the director of the National Library Service. Please welcome to the show, Jason Broughton. Hey, Jason, how are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I am really pleased to be here, and I know it took us a little bit of time based on my schedules, but I am just humbled and happy to be here with you.
Well, you know, all the best things come to those who wait and have patience.
Oh, I would definitely say, and I don't want to say you save the best for last, but I think I have a lot to discuss. That'll be really, really wonderful for people to think about and also just know about what we do.
Yeah. So tell us about the National Library. People are familiar with their school libraries and their local public libraries and their little free libraries, but I don't think a lot of people know what the National Library Service is all about.
All right, so let me try to give you a snapshot because I know we only have a little bit of time, and I can be a conversationalist, so I love to talk. So just know that that's a dangerous thing with me. But within that, I would say the National Library Service is a part of the Library of Congress. We have been around for 91 years, celebrating our 91st. This year. 90 was last year, which was really, really nice. And with that, our full name is the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled. And within that, we are a free service that allows people to have access to materials who qualify for them, in which they can have things what are known as talking books, which is kind of like a thumb drive in the sense that's in a specific shell-style cartridge that goes into a unique device, along with Braille and a host of other things for people who cannot, in a sense, read standard, I would say, print within that. And again, there's a little bit of an eligibility requirement. We make this, however, accessible through a network of libraries. We have 94 of them across the country and in U.S. territories. And within that, it has access to books, magazines, musical scores, and a host of other things. The way I like to describe it is whatever you and I, as a sighted person, have access to, people who are visually impaired or print disabled should also have access to, and that is the goal of our service within that. We have, I would say, a catalog that is quite extensive, and there's some other things I'll talk about later on that has helped to expand our, I would say, collection in a variety of different ways that people might not know about. And within it, it's called the Marrakesh Treaty, in which we have agreements that we are able to receive and also send different types of materials from across the world.
Wow. That's amazing. Now, 91 years ago, back in the 80s, we passed the Americans with Disabilities Act. But this service was created long before that. Whose brainchild was this?
Oh, my goodness. This came, I don't know the specifics, but I definitely was one of the president's wives had a conversation about the need to ensure that materials in the Library of Congress, because there were basically, these reading rooms. And in part of that, we had a war in which a lot of the veterans within that situation were not kind of afforded the same types of items. And that began the conversation to kind of establish a reading room that allowed those with these types of disabilities, particularly vision impairment, at the time basically blind and a host of other things, to have access to that. Now, when I state that, here's why it's very unique. As a part of our, I would say, mission, which is really a mandate that's in legislation, we have two specific caveats that we must always adhere to, and that is going to be to provide resources for the blind and what we call the print disabled. The former word used to be kind of like handicapped. We no longer use that. That has been kind of removed and updated in a sense. And the other is to veterans. And because of that, those are our main two areas. But within that, we have an umbrella of things that are afforded us a wonderful opportunity to provide services to a host of people within that umbrella. And in coming on your show today, one of the areas that people might not know that we also are navigating to provide services is to young people and young adults, particularly children. And for those parents who might not know, that we would be doing this through reading disabilities can also qualify for our service as well.
So a kid who is struggling with a severe form of dyslexia, perhaps? Dyslexia,
yes.
Or other types of learning challenges?
You hit the nail on the head within that. What we want to make sure, which I know a lot of your listeners do, is that people really understand, I would say probably on your show, what the value of literacy means and how it can open the door to a young person's, I would say, life and pretty much change it forever. A book does do that for you. And within that, what we try to do is to make sure that children of all calibers who are eligible for our program have access to that. And that can come in a whole host of ways in looking at different types of titles. This is a little bit different than, I would say, we don't do, for example, textbooks. We do all the other types of things. And again, it can come in a whole host of formats. As I said, it could come through what is known as the talking book service, an audio cartridge. It can also come online on your own device, which we have a thing called Bard, which is our online platform where it can be delivered to you. We also have Braille. And if we have a little bit of time, I can even talk about some technological advances in which we have e-Braille. Now, people might find that kind of like, what do you mean e-Braille? Yes, we now have devices, if you can imagine it, a little device, something like a rectangular object, and it has what are known as pins. Instead of the dots, those dots have been transformed into metal pins that actually can move up and down as a person's finger rolls across that and allows it to kind of be like a movable style of, I would say, communication. And it's getting faster and it's getting better. And within that, we are seen as, I would say, a leader on the frontier of technology with this. That might sound kind of interesting for people to know that the government on this one is kind of not taking lead, but definitely amongst the pack. And we are doing a lot of prototypes. We have a pilot out across the country in which we've just had a lot of enthusiasm on, I would say, piloting this device where people want to kind of come into the pilot because when they have received it, they cannot believe that there's now technology that allows them to electronically play with Braille.
We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Jason. If you know anybody who is blind or maybe struggling with dyslexia, please tell them about the service. And why don't you invite them to listen to our entire interview with Jason? It can be found on our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the button that says, listen to all of our podcasts here. And then you can use the search tool when you get over to our podcast page to search for Jason Broughton. It was first published on June 4th, 2022. Right now, former White House chief correspondent Ben Feller is here to celebrate his debut picture book. You mentioned it a couple of times, and I just want to highlight it. A lot of times as adults, we'll bend over to talk to kids, and that's cool. But I think what you're talking about, crouching down, getting on your knee, bringing yourself down to their level, it really makes a difference. And it was something I discovered when I was working with kids with severe developmental disabilities. Just lowering myself to get to their level made a difference, and it was different than bending down because I was still over them at that point. And when we can get down on our kids' level, it makes a huge difference. And I really recommend that to everybody who hasn't learned that lesson yet?
Well, it's fun to hear you say that, and even the difference between getting down on a knee and crouching over someone. Because what I remember as I'm listening to you is, and I see a lot of kids do this, when they feel embarrassed or frustrated or sad, they look down. Mm-hmm. They lower their head, they lower their eyes. It's like a physical letting down of themselves. And so if you're standing over them and their head is down, you're not connecting on any level. So what I would do is get down to his level and then gently, pick his chin up and say, let's reset here. Look at daddy. Okay. What's the problem? I can't do this. Okay. Well, then let's do it together. Zip. All right. Instantly we figured it out. So you feel better. It takes a second, but now you do it. You feel the power. Okay. It's just hard for me to picture doing all that at 6'1", standing over him, right? Let's get to his level. But eye contact and warmth and compassion and breathing all go into the problem solving. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that. I kind of felt like, what would I need here? And some of that was intuitive. And then when it worked, as I said earlier, parenting is trial and error. Hey, big problems, little problems. He's liking it. He's loving it. We were going to handshake. Let's go with it, right?
Yeah.
Well, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you've had a lot of experience spending time with people who are solving big problems. You were the chief White House correspondent for Associated Press, the largest news organization in the world. You were the guy that asked the first questions at a presidential news conference. Did you learn this idea of making big problems into little problems from any of the leaders that you covered?
I think I learned it. It's easier to answer that question in retrospect. It wasn't like, it was this linear path of I did this and now I'm going to turn it into this book or this next stage of my career. Everything is easier to see looking back. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure that I learned the problem solving from the people I covered, but I learned it in large part from having covered them, because the job of journalism is constantly problem solving. How am I going to figure out this information and make it accessible and accurate and clear and important to a lot of readers? And then as soon as you solve that, if you do it really well at the highest stakes at the White House against the biggest, most competitive press corps in the world, your reward is you start all over again the next day with a blank screen and a different problem that they also don't want to talk to you about. Mm-hmm. And over and over and over again, finding out the information, getting it right, getting it first, and then turning it into stories that matter to people. That informed the book in the sense that my career and a lot of my life has been about making the complicated simple for readers and how do we solve problems. Mm-hmm. And I brought that mindset into parenting. And I didn't think about that necessarily when I was writing the book because it was just so personal and passionate. But the more I think back through interviews, I'm like, yeah, it's my style. It's consistent with my career, and everything I've done in the last several years has definitely been informed by what it was like to sit in that front seat and ask questions of the president. It's definitely has prepared me for other things in life, for sure.
Yeah. One of the things I like to ask anytime I have somebody in the media on the program, I think a huge part of my job as a parent, now my kids are adults, but I thought that at the time when they were younger that it was really important for me to help my kids become media literate and help them learn how to discern what information they could trust and what information they had to verify. It's, I think, even more of an issue now because kids are inundated with information from all different sources. Not all of them are reliable or reputable. What advice could you give to parents in how they can help their kids become media literate and know what sources to trust and what not to trust and to question and how to go about asking those questions?
So it's the last thing you said that I think would be my guidance. It's to question. And specifically, if you're a young reader and don't know the media landscape, like, how am I supposed to figure this out? Who do I trust? Your parents or the adults around you who you respect and who do have experience in this, I would ask them, how did you decide to follow that news outlet? Why do you always watch that morning show? when you go online and your newspaper of choice, your news source of choice is X. Why? And, that way you're getting past I'm reading this and following these sites because my parents do. Mm-hmm. That's almost like an inheritance of news judgment. It's, well, why? And parents are going to have to do a little bit of work in that situation. Well, let me deconstruct my thinking. Sometimes it's going to be because of political views. This news outlet reinforces how I feel about politics in American life. And so I like that because we sort of talk to each other. That's not how I would do it, right? I like the diversity of views, but mostly as a former reporter, I am a ardent fan of accuracy. What are the facts? How do you put them into context, and how can you defend them? And so, there is such a thing as an empirical truth, right? This is the vote that happened. These are the elements of the bill. Here's why they did it. Here's how it's going to affect you. Here's how it's going to affect the election, right? Facts and analysis. And so, that's what I would do, is just be a good questioner. Help me understand it. Why do you listen to that outlet? Why do you like them? And, I think it's going to be a really interesting experience for grown-ups in that situation, because they're saying, hey, I'm raising a critical thinker and I'm helping, And when I was a kid, we read the local newspaper. Why? Because they brought it to the door. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like there was 5 choices and we could have an analytical discussion about it. It's like, that's what you read. Mm-hmm. And then as life got more complex and, there was a thing called the internet, and now all these newspapers and sources are online. And now, boy, it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It's overwhelming. So that's how I would start.
Yeah. We have a number of interns working here on the podcast this summer. It's like insane how many interns we have. And all of them are students at Emerson College here in Boston. And they're all looking to get into journalism. If you had one piece of advice for them, what would it be?
I think that the elements of reporting are foundational to so many parts of life, so many elements of work. And they're as important today as they were, 25, 30 years ago when I got my start. So I wouldn't worry about the latest social media platform, storytelling in 13 seconds. How do I get more followers? I wouldn't worry about pumping up a resume by grabbing as many opportunities as you can to make it look good. What I would do is get the elements of storytelling right. Mm-hmm. Right? Practice on accuracy, on relevance to the reader, thinking like a reader, checking your facts, keeping your writing clear, concise, tight, attention to detail, right? Have you checked it? Have you double checked it? I'm telling you, those foundational skills will allow you to compete with the other young interns and get that one spot, get that first job, right? I don't have experience yet, but in everything that I've studied and every volunteer job I have, every internship I have, I put accuracy first. I put my audience first. I put attention to detail first. I put work ethic first. Because when you're young and you can't say I did this job versus that job, you can have traits, traits, attention, and that's what I would do. And then you're going to get the first job. Yeah. And now not only are you going to have those values, you're going to say, and here are my clips. And here's my segments, right? That's what I would do.
Awesome. Hey, I'm going to ask you in a minute if you've caught the kids' picture book writing bug, but before I do, I got to ask you, how cool is it to fly on Airforce One?
It's really cool. It's this one I've also learned in retrospect when I was trying to fly out of LaGuardia here in New York, and they said, we're 33rd in line for takeoff. And I'm like, oh my God, this never happened. The president got on the plane, sat down, and we started to take off 500 miles an hour. But I didn't have to wait until later chapters to know it. I mean, I would pull in to Andrews Air Force Base in that little Honda Civic that I used to have and see the tail of the plane and say, okay, good. I didn't miss the plane. Rule number 1. And it would, we'd walk up and see the president get up the front steps, and we'd hurry to the back, and the press corps would go up. And it's the thing about when you see the White House press corps is it all looks so big, the East Room and the news conferences. But when you're in it, it's amazing to me how small it gets, right? Because when I was on Air Force One, there was only room for like 12 of us. Mm-hmm. There was one wire service reporter, one newspaper reporter, one TV reporter, some still photographers, and a camera crew. And we would rotate so that everybody got a shot. But man, the world gets really small. The president would come back. Hey guys, how you doing? Ready for today? And if they took questions, they would get quiet. And if I was on the plane, they'd start with me. They would just stop and I would get to set the tone. It was amazing experience. And also a really cool airplane.
If you are interested in listening to the entire conversation we had with Ben Feller, please be sure to go to readingwithyourkids.com, click on that, listen to all of our podcasts here, and then use the toolbar to search for Ben Feller. His episode first appeared July 4th, 2022. And of course, you can search anywhere you find your podcast for the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Right now, one of my favorite, highlights from one of my favorite interviews of the year with Jazmyn Simon. Join us right now from Los Angeles in California. Our guest today is here to celebrate her debut picture book, and it is a beautiful one, too. The name of the book is Most Perfect You. Please welcome to the show the most perfect Jazmyn Simon. Hey, Jazmyn.
Well, thank you. Hello. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. We had such a lovely conversation. We should have recorded our opening conversation. It was perfect, but
it's all in my heart, so we can start there.
So let's talk about Most Perfect You. You were telling me the inspiration, and I think that was such a beautiful story.
So yes, I was inspired by a conversation that I had with my daughter, Kennedy Irie. She's 17 years old, a senior in high school now, on her way to Northwestern University. But many years ago, she was a 3-year-old sitting in the backseat of the car, and she says to me, Mommy, I want to be pretty. I need to have lighter skin. And I was heartbroken because as a parent, you want your children to know how perfect they are, just the way they are. And I said, well, Kennedy, if you don't like your skin color, it's my fault. Because I had a conversation with God when I was pregnant, and I told him I wanted you to have my favorite color of skin, and that's the color of skin that you have now. And I told her that every single thing about her I got to pick. And so she was a culmination of all of my favorite things. Obviously, I didn't say culmination because she was 3, but I'm telling you, you're a grown up. And she sat in the back seat. She thought about it for a second, and she said, okay. And then she moved on. I think she found some validation in the fact that she wasn't a mistake. Mm-hmm. It wasn't on accident that she looked the way that she looked. She was specifically and specially made by me, her mom, to be all the things that I know to be beautiful. And I hope that she would have learned to find them beautiful as well. So that happened. And now, 14 years later, here we are with my debut book coming out May 3rd.
What a perfect thing to say to your kids. And it's so perfect. It's like, had you practiced that? Did you anticipate this and have a cue card like waiting for you? So when it came up, it was like, okay, I got that. You know,
you are not the first person to say that. Like, what a great response. And I'll say that some things are just meant to be. I was meant to tell her that. I had no idea what I was going to say. And actually, my best friend of 23 years was in the car with us. And I just remember looking at her and my eyes started to water because you want your kid to love themselves. And I just said it. It must have lived somewhere deep in my heart, and it must have been planted there for a long time, waiting for that moment. But miraculously, I just came up with it or came out with it and told her that. It was not pre-planned. I had never thought about it before. And until things happen in parenthood, you're not prepared for them. Mm-hmm. But luckily in that moment, I knew a couple of things to be true. I knew that she was the prettiest girl that I had ever seen. And I knew that she was everything that I had ever wanted. And so I thought, well, I'm going to tell her both of those things in a way that her 3-year-old mind would understand. So I guess I'm just a poet.
What a beautiful image, that image that, hey, I talked to God. And this is what I asked for. And God said yes.
I can't really argue with God, can you?
You can't?
You know, it's like, where do you go from there? It's like, God, okay.
Okay.
So yeah, I had this conversation and I said, these are my favorite things. And he said, I am in agreement with you. Mm-hmm. I agree that those things are lovely and perfect. So I'm going to make that for you. And so, you know, my hope is that all parents everywhere have this resource to lean back on and say that you are perfect. There's nothing about you that is a mistake or an accident. Mm-hmm. So,
and that is a beautiful It's a beautiful thought, and it's something that's shared in the Bible. And I wish we have a lot of people out there banging on the Bible and shouting about what the Bible says. And I really wish that they would focus on the most important parts of the Bible, that where God says, I delight in you. I made you the way you are. I made that person the way they are. So just love each other.
We are all made in his image. And that's the thing. He delights in all of us. And you are absolutely right. We'll have to talk about this on a different podcast. But I too wish that people would focus on the highlights and not the lowlights in the Bible. More love, less hate. More joy, less criticism. More unity, less division. Nonetheless, I hope that this book, the other good book, yes, some light and some joy. Yes.
So you were saying before we started recording that Most Perfect You, you're not focusing on skin color in the story. Your character has a problem, same problem I have. Your character's not crazy about her hair, and
that's
I'm
right.
not crazy about the fact that I don't have any more.
I mean, I have this mom bun going on right now. So yes. So I was very thoughtful when I wrote this book. I'm a Black woman and my daughter is Black. And oftentimes, I have about 1,000 books I have a lot of books. We read a lot. And I've never really picked up a book and thought this is a Black book or a white book or, it's just a book. And a good book is a good book. And I knew that with my good book, I wanted everybody to read it and find a piece of them in this book. And I thought, if I made it strictly about race, then that leaves out a whole subset of people, right? Naturally. So I said, well, what's something that everybody wants to change? Their hair. If it's long, they want it short. If it's straight, they want it curly. If it's curly, they want it straight. If it's thinning, they want it thick, right? So there's always, so in my book, little Irie comes downstairs and she hates her hair. It's too poofy, she says. When the other girls play at school, their hair swings from side to side, but hers just doesn't do that. And she wants to wear a hat. So her mom reminds her that it's July, so it's a little hot for a hat. And she asks her, why does she want to wear this hat? And Irie goes on to tell her that she doesn't like her hair. So that's the first key, right? The first key is the mom asks her why she doesn't want, what's wrong. And I think that's something that we can all learn as parents. We assume that kids can't vocalize how they're feeling. But we should ask our kids, what's going on? Why do you want to do this? So Irie's mom asks her, why does she want to wear this hat? And she confides in her that she doesn't like her hair. And then her mom takes her on a magical journey to explain to her that her hair and every little tiny detail about her was hand-picked, that her mother had a conversation with God and said, these are all of my favorite things, and God let her pick all the special parts to make her daughter her. And the main message is that her mom didn't make her to be like anybody else. Her mom made her just to be her, and that she is perfect exactly the way that she is. So, I mean, I really, truly love this book. Obviously.
Yeah.
I feel very passionate about it. There's so much hurt and sadness in the world, in our kids. Sometimes I feel like our kids grow up really fast in the age of social media, and it's easy to compare yourself to other people. And here's the thing. When people look perfect on social media, they very rarely tell you what it went into making them look like that. They never, I hope you can see me. I have a fresh face, a mom bun, some clips in the back, because I'm a working mother of 2 children. I have a 2-year-old and a 17-year-old, and it's a lot of work. I can't be glamorous all the time. Sometimes I just have to be myself, which is more than good enough. But these children see these images on TV, images on social media, and they think, I want to be that. But that person's not telling the truth. That they have a makeup artist and a hairdresser and a stylist and a personal trainer and plastic surgery. And there's some things about these people you can never get unless you buy. And if we could just get our kids to know that is not real. You are real and perfect. And beyond that, you are specifically and specially made. You are my special order. Like I went to the mall and I picked all of these things to make you individualized. I think if our kids knew that, how much stronger would they be? How much happier and loved would they, it's really about loving yourself.
Yeah.
About saying, no, I can look in the mirror, and when I see myself, no, I don't see a Kardashian. I see Jazmyn, and Jazmyn is real, and this is and real and lovable. I'm lovable just the way that I am, and I really want all of our kids to know that.
We hope you've enjoyed this look back at some of our favorite moments from 2022. And we hope that you will be with us and not miss an episode. Coming up in 2023, we have all sorts of fantastic guests lined up for you. And also, we are debuting Drawing with Your Kids. It's going to be our YouTube channel, special great content created just for kids and their families. It's going to be found on YouTube, but our debut episode, you can find it right here tomorrow, January 1st, 2023, on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. You can actually watch the podcast from whatever podcasting app you find the podcast. And that includes the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. I want to thank everybody who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our great guests, Jason Broughton, Finn Feller, Jazmyn Simon. I want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Mirabella Q, Jordan Staley, Stephanie Davila, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.